Good evening. I am Marcella Howard, president of In Our Own Voice, National Black Women's Reproductive Justice Agenda, and I would like to welcome you to our really important discussion that we are going to be having on voter engagement, voting rights, and building Black political power. So this is the second session that we have had. We had one that was on voter suppression, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, but we're really going to talk today about what people are doing to make sure that Black men and women are getting to the polls, making sure that their votes are counting. So we have some remarkable people with us today, and I will introduce them in a couple of minutes. I just want everyone to know that there are 36 days left before the election, November 3rd. 36 days. We do not have enough time, but thank goodness we don't have to wait too much more. But everybody should be ready to vote. And I want to let you know that if you go to blackwomen.vote and click on the map on your state, it will give you all the information about what's going on in your state. You can check your voter registration. Everybody should do that because what's happening in a lot of states they are purging the voter rolls. So the first thing you want to do is make sure your name is still there, and then check out how you can vote, whether it is absentee ballots, whether your state has early voting, or if you have to go to the polls on election day. But we want to make sure that you actually go and vote. So finally, I want to encourage everyone who's listening to, if you want to ask questions or have comments, put them in the chat and we will be able to see your questions. So I'm going to just move right into our first panel. And we have with us Cherisse Scott, who is the executive director of Sister Reach, a Memphis-based reproductive justice organization. Sister Cherisse kicks butt. I just want you to know. She is, and I say that in all, due deference to the fact that her organization is a faith-based organization. Let's be
we cuss though.
This is what she does, and this is what she has always done. And I love talking to Cherisse about what's going on in Tennessee. Also with us is Tami Sawyer, who is a county commissioner, right? County commissioner in Shelby County, which is Memphis. So, and she is also the field director for Black Voters Matter. And so we're just going to get right into this. As I said, we only got 36 days left until Election Day. So what is the plan to make sure that every voter turns out and that every vote counts in Tennessee? Cherisse, you want to start?
Sure, I'll kick it off. Thanks so much for coordinating this important discussion, Marcella. We're definitely excited to be partners of the National Black Reproductive Justice Agenda in our own voice. Well, for us, we are, as a grassroots organization, trying to do the things that work within our capacity to motivate voters to the polls and keep my staff safe at the same time. So for us, that's looking like a lot of virtual organizing, digital organizing. We've been having several conversations. Commissioner Sawyer also was a part of one of our town halls a couple of weeks ago. And we've been just trying to engage women and folks in our community and across the state, folks who follow us nationally, on issues that have been happening here in Memphis, on issues that are going on in Tennessee and impact Tennesseans, whether or not that's voter suppression or mental health needs or the impact of COVID-19 and assembling regardless or despite national concerns and health concerns from the CDC. We've been trying to just kind of meet folks where they are and have conversations that make sense to them. We have some upcoming conversations as well with a couple of state representatives. I'll be talking to Representative Karen Camper on tomorrow for RJ Week of Action. but we've been, just trying to show up and be in partnership with others who are doing voter engagement on the ground here in Memphis. Just trying to make sure that folks in Shelby County get out. This is one of the areas of the South where we know we've seen voter suppression issues happen. I'm sure Commissioner Sawyer can talk all about that because she's definitely had to feel the brunt of it campaigning, of what it really means to try to motivate your people to the polls and know that you have the support and the values that your campaign supports, the values of the things that really are impacting people, just for folks to present barriers and issues at voting locations for people to actually get out there and to vote. So our role has definitely been trying to educate folks and ask questions, ask hard questions of our elected officials and our city leaders, our national leaders. So the questions that many of our followers want to know and things that are going to inform how they show up, and to be quite honest, if they show up at the polls.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Tami, what are you hearing from people?
I mean, it's a tough election season. 2020 has just been a hell of a year for most people, and especially for Black people, from losing Kobe to COVID to where we are today with the election. I mean, hearing that the president paid $750 in taxes, when you add a zero to that for most of us, just trying to make it on a daily basis. Average Black person is living paycheck to paycheck, regardless of what class they identify with. And so what we're seeing is that in the hierarchy of needs, the election is just not pinging high enough. And that's unfortunate. There's different approaches. One thing that I've learned in my time with Black Voters Matter was that we can't force people to the polls in a way that feels like we're punishing them or we're chastising them. We have to get people there to help them realize that the issues that they're facing, the stress of capitalism, the oppression of white supremacy, those are things that we believe that we can change with our vote by getting different people in office. But you do have to connect the dots for folks. I ran for mayor last year, and one thing people would say to me, I don't care that you would be the first Black woman. We've had Black electeds before, and what did they do for us? So we always have to overcome that apathy, because we have had chances and opportunities, and they haven't always been in the best interest of our people. And so when folks are just trying to make it every day and generationally experiencing deep levels of poverty and educational inequity, voting is just not number one. And so it's going to be really, really hard to get the percentage of people that we need to the polls this year. Just also because people are at home. People are trying to, people have lost their jobs that were already paying them below a, livable wage. And so all we can do is try to, Black Voters Matter talks about bringing Black love and joy. Bring that love and joy to these conversations. Don't tell people you can't protest if you don't vote, or don't tell people I don't want to hear you complain if you don't vote. Lovingly engage folks with the joy of what a revolution would look like if we really all showed up at the polls. And I think that's the only chance we really have to get the turnout we need for November 3rd.
Absolutely.
So we are in like a totally different time than we've been in any other election. I mean, there's COVID-19, there's people being laid off, there's food insecurity issues, and then people also have their kids at home where they're trying to keep them up to speed for their classes and things. And then you're right. Then there's the issue of whether or not they have a job, whether or not they're getting a paycheck. What do you really say to voters with all of that going on? I mean, how do you get them to even think about voting right now?
I know one of the things that we've just really been acknowledging that folks are just in a real tight spot right now, that people are struggling, are stressed, are angry, right, at a system that doesn't necessarily seem to protect them, that is not designed for them to win, So we've been just trying to kind of meet folks where they are, talking to people about, that these are the things, right, that it's important for us to think about the ways that we tackle the presidential election, but we're already having conversations about the next local and state elections, because for us, and especially with the presidential election, potentially being a bit unsure for many voters, a bit unsure for many of us. I mean, our tagline at Sister Reach is that we are the people that we serve. So we've got some of these same reservations. We have some of this same fear, right? But I think has been where we have been able to make some level of kind of aligning understanding is that nobody wants any more of what we've had over these last 3 to 4 years. That we understand that it has been, for many of our communities, many of our families, some of the worst, issues that we've seen, with folks experiencing a health crisis, employment crisis, food sustainability issues, that this has been something that has increased over the last 3 or so years. And that hopefully for some is a motivator for them to go ahead and go to the polls. And for many, it hasn't, it's just been a deterrent. Folks are just overwhelmed. And so we've just tried to be sensitive to that while still trying to encourage in a way that doesn't seem shaming and blaming, and your ancestors did this and that for you, and, make folks feel like they gotta do this, while in the same breath, just trying to hold the fact that this is a very important election, and that if we don't show up, for many of us, who's to say that in 4 years we'll be actually all here together having these same types of conversations, and that is the thing. So it's not necessarily fear as much as it is, it's just a very honest grounding about how things are actually playing out in the world and in our lives and in our families.
So Tami, you actually are part of the bus that it went around all, in the 2018 election for Black Voters Matters. How is that going to be? Is that going to function this time with COVID and everything else? Or how is that going to be run?
So I've only been with Black Voter Matter this year, but what Black Voters Matter has planned and actually kicked off, the co-founders of Black Voters Matter, Cliff and Latasha, are actually on the road right now. They were in Pittsburgh all day Sunday with the bus, and so the bus is going to each of our big states. Black Voters Matter has 10 major states that we organize in, and then also hitting Texas and some other states that are key players in this election. And in addition to that, our field team. So of our 10 states, they each have gotten 2 minibuses. So instead of one big bus, there is a big bus and 20 minibuses wrapped with Black Voters Matters message, riding around the United States, reaching out to Black voters, doing caravans to the polls, all with social distancing, rides to the polls, social distance rides to the polls, caravans to the polls, showing up at, events at polls. Just sometimes all you need is the bus to drive down the street, and people are going to follow it. We actually took the bus to Louisville for, the primary in August, and folks were just so excited to see the bus and get t-shirts that say Black Voters Matter on it. It's an amazing tool that Cliff and Latasha have created. We're going to see it here in Tennessee very soon. Our bus started in Nashville. One of the 2 minivans that we have started last weekend, and it'll be across the state through Election Day. We actually are hosting the final presidential debate in Nashville, and that'll be quite interesting. And so I don't think it's because of Biden.
Come out. So as the vans and the buses go around, people are coming out and wanting to get information and things.
Yeah, even before COVID hit, I remember being in South Carolina, and we were driving down the street playing a little James Brown, and folks were poking their heads out, and when we hopped off the bus with signs and swag, people were already engaged because they saw this big bus that says Black Voters Matter across it. It's an ingenious tool that Cliff and Latasha have brought to the toolbox that we need to get voters out.
Okay, so as a final question, have you seen a lot of voter suppression in Tennessee? And if so, what are people doing about it?
I'm going to pitch that one to Tami first, because I know she can talk about what's happening in real time. Mm-hmm.
Voter suppression exists naturally in our state, in our country, right? So there's, the nature of the United States is that the majority of the people don't engage. Like, they don't want us to get to majority participation. And so what Tennessee has done as a red state, as a predominantly Republican state, is it has engaged in voter suppression through policy. The Equity Alliance was successful in a lawsuit against the state just last year, or earlier this year, actually. The Equity Alliance and the ACLU were able to successfully sue the state of Tennessee because they wanted to charge people who touched, not if you hand someone a voter registration form and they give it back to you, they wanted to make that a felony. And if that form is wrong,
they fill it out and then they hand it back to you.
Me touching your voter registration form would have been cause for arrest, considered fraud, because they said they were protecting the voter. And then if you paid me, so, if your organization hired me to go out and register voters, that was going to be considered illegal because it would make voter fraud heavier. But what happened is the Equity Alliance and other organizations in Tennessee were able to get tens of thousands of Black voters registered before the 2018 election, which is the election in which I was one of several Black women who were elected to office. And we took over Shelby County, Tennessee, for the first time, the most Black women ever elected in Tennessee in one bubble, in one election. And so they saw that and they were like, oh, not our state. And so voter suppression exists. And there are people right now pushing for certain type of ballot boxes, and our election commission is appointed by Republican governors for the last 30 years. And the election commission is saying, no, we don't want hand-marked paper ballots, but the people are saying we do, and so all of that exists. It's not so much as I walk in and you don't let me vote anymore. It's much more ingrained in policy, and there's a lot of money invested in making sure that these policies are passed across the South. Koch brothers have been very, very versatile in the ways that they impact our vote, and organizations like them are spreading these policies across the South, across the country, to keep Black voters from having any impact on elections.
Which is one of the reasons to look at local elections and change people who are there, so that, because we concentrate so much in this country on presidential and congressional elections, but the laws that actually govern people's lives are state laws and local laws. And I want to just give a little shout out to our program called I Am a Voter, which Sister Reach is part of, and it's specifically about encouraging Black women to come out and vote in local and state elections, to make sure that we're there saying these are the people who actually impact your lives, because they get to do the laws that you have to abide by if you live in Tennessee or if you live in Georgia and any other state. So you need to know who these people are. They're the ones who make laws dealing with schools. They make laws dealing with the police, all of those things. And those are local and state elections. And so that's the way we're going to take democracy back for Black communities, is those local elections, one by one.
Absolutely.
So I want to thank you two for coming on. It's time for us to go to our second segment. So for those of you who want to get involved in Tennessee, Cherisse, who do they call?
Definitely can reach out to sisterreach.org. You can reach out to us, that's sisterreach.org. And not only are we working on the ground around voter engagement, but around reproductive and sexual health, information and access and resources. So please do feel free to reach out.
And Tami, for Black Voters Matters?
Yep, definitely follow Black Voters Matter on social media, and that's Black Voters MTR on all social media to see where our buses will be. You can also go to our webpage, blackvotersmatterfund.org. I'm actually the outgoing national field director, and so I will still be engaged in commission work and activism and organizing. So if you want to reach me directly after October 1st, I'm at Tami Sawyer on all social media platforms, and I will definitely be engaged in these races. Also in Tennessee, we have the opportunity to elect the first Black female senator for Tennessee. Y'all check out Marquita Bradshaw, send your coins,
Yes.
send your volunteers, text bank, help us for the first time get a Black in Tennessee Senate. And shout out to Mike, Mississippi Love.
Wonderful. Okay, I want to thank you for all the hard work that you're doing in Tennessee, and I want to thank you for taking time out of that busy schedule to talk to us about what's happening in voter work that you're doing in Tennessee.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Take care, Patrisse. Thank you.
Bye, Tami.
So we're now going to be joined for our second piece by, there they are, Patrisse Cullors, who is here from Black Lives Matters, and Dazon Dixon Diallo, who is the head of Sister Love. Why are you so dark? Oh, there it is. You're in the
that kind of time, Marcella. It's that kind of time.
So I want to welcome you two here. I want to just do the right kind of intro first, because I know both of these people, so I'm just happy they're here. Patrisse is an artist, an organizer, and a freedom fighter, and she is the co-founder and executive director of Black Lives Matter. And Dazon, who I've known forever, is the executive director of Sister Love, which is a 31-year-old organization in that reproductive justice organization that works at the intersections of HIV, sexual and reproductive health, and works for the empowerment of Black women. So I want to welcome the two of you here. We're going to talk a little bit about organizing and how you go from organizing to policy work to legislation. That's the trajectory we are going to do, so that people understand that voting is just your first step.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Then you've got to hold those elected officials accountable. And so let's talk a little bit about that. Tell me a little bit about what you see from building a grassroots organization, organizing work, to getting to legislative power. Patrisse?
Sure. I'll start. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful to be in this conversation, especially right now in the moment that we're in. You know, I think that for a lot of people, especially when you're in a moment of a protest or a protest movement or uprising, folks don't realize all that it takes to get to that place. And while much of the protest and organizing happens organically, there's still so much work that happens behind the scenes to get us to a place where you can get in the streets and have folks helping and supporting people be out in the streets. One of the things that I learned early on as an organizer was you got to build your base, you got to build your team, and you got to build your membership, and you have to go out every single day and talk to people and get people to recognize and realize how important it is to make a better society. And so one of the first places I'll say is that just classic one-on-one organizing is talking to your community, your neighbors, the people around you, and really helping position your movement so that people can get involved. Once you get people involved, and I'm of the school, and I'm pretty sure Dazon is as well, of you get the people involved who are most directly impacted by the issue you want them to get involved with. So our work really looks like, inside of Black Lives Matter, working with people who've been directly impacted by state violence, by mass incarceration in particular, and then helping them and supporting them build their power. And so we try our hardest to work alongside communities who've been directly impacted. I come from a directly impacted community. I was organized into an organization as someone who was directly impacted. And from there was kind of learned the whole world of, oh, what's local government? Oh, those people have the power to say, what happens in the jails or what happens to the police. I had no idea. So learning how to advocate on my own behalf and my community's behalf, I think becomes really critical. I think the next phase of that is, once we have clarity on what we want to fix in our communities or what we want to get rid of or what we want to bring in the community, then we start to realize, oh, that's going to take some sort of policy change or legislative change. And I'm also of the school that the people most directly impacted should be leading the policy change and the legislative change. And so you may work with folks who, like lawyers, who can draft the legislation, but it's still critical that the people who are directly impacted are at the center of creating that legislation. And then from there, you try to pass it. Sometimes it takes a year, sometimes it could take 6 years, sometimes you're waiting your whole life and you may not see it pass, but the next generation will see it pass. And so that's just in the legislative space. We could have a whole another conversation about candidates, but I do think it's really important that people understand there is an entire process and that our work isn't just about showing up in the streets, although that's critical and important, but we do there's so many other facets to the work that we do to help make our society stronger and better.
Dazon?
Yep. And Marcella, if I just can, I had it all set up. The lighting was great. I was using my fabulous, beautiful Logi webcam, and then the system used the laptop camera. So what do you do? So I love my little secret background imagery anyway. I am so grateful to be here. Hey, Patrisse and Marcella. This is a great conversation too. So really, in terms of mobilizing folks, and here's the other part that I think is really important in terms of what Patrisse is talking about, that Sister Love is also a service provider. And so I think for so many organizations that are involved in advocacy and in policy and in mobilization work and in the social change and social justice aspects of it, have to acknowledge that as service providers, the very people that we're delivering services to, just as Patrisse was saying, are the very people that ought to be, should be, and need to be mobilized to be the voices on behalf of their own struggles, their own issues, as well as their own solutions, and knowing what some of those answers are and demanding what it is that they need to have fixed. And so it's important for us as a service provider to integrate those two things. So even if it's around mobilizing voters, that when we're doing HIV testing and now we're actually partnered up, for example, with faith-based institutions to do COVID testing and self-testing around HIV, it's also a perfect time to do voter registration and voter education. We're also directly engaged in a lot of different partnerships that have already been on the ground. Because here's the other thing. Mobilizing voters around election time is very critical because that's the mass movement that we need. But it's also really important to be mobilizing voters all the time so that they can be holding those legislators accountable throughout every year and not just through the election season. And, in Georgia, we have a very short season. So we have learned how to get in there in those 40 days that they do a whole lot of things that affect a whole lot of our lives, but then stay engaged with them throughout the year. And then I would add too, because Patrisse said a whole lot of the exact same things that we would say, is that once, and this was on a call that we had last week that I heard was most important, is that not only that once you vote, that you then hold those folks who are in power to account, but then you also start your work to run and become those folks in power. So someone said the other day that yes, right now we vote today, we run tomorrow. And so we also are encouraging folks. I've been in the field long enough where we have seen people living with HIV run for office and win those seats. We have seen people go to school and get their law degrees and then become legal advocates, or to become counselors and to become agitators as much as activists and advocates. I think it was at one of our In Our Own Voice events where Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley said it just as Patrisse did so beautifully, where the people who are closest to the pain must be the people closest to the power. And so we are happy to be that, either that bridge, that gateway, that stepping stone, that stepping ladder, whatever it is that people need to reach that level of engagement. We want to be that train that helps us get there.
So I asked this question in the earlier segment. I'm going to ask it of you again. COVID-19, unemployment in large numbers, kids homeschooling, food insecurity, paycheck insecurity. How do you think voting and organizing actually fits in with that? How does it prioritize as you're reaching out to people?
It's no doubt that it's tough. It's really, really tough, because they're in the virtual world. It's sort of this double edge where there are almost too many ways to get to people.
That's right.
And then you also don't really know which way at the moment to get to people. So there's almost no way to get to people if we're not still in person. And so we're having to be almost 360 degrees as we think about this. You know, whether we're showing up in all of the different virtual spaces, but also for those who are out there, for those, we have people in our midst who have been willing to go to the streets and not only be a part of the protest, but also educate folks about what we're doing so that they get that information. I, for example, have my own radio show, so we're using that. I wanted to give a shout to Tami because we talked to April Albright from Black Voters Matter last week, and she reminded me of something. And this is the other thing, is we're coming to people in all kinds of ways with, I think, the messages that sort of hit people where they need to be. And one of the things that she's clear about is what a lot of people don't pay attention to, for example, in the Declaration of Independence, is that we don't have to put up with what we have. We don't have to work incrementally and work bit by bit and try and tweak it here, or make sure we have one particular piece of a legislation that covers everything. We can shut the whole thing down and start it over because we have the right to abolish government when it no longer works for us. So all of this abolitionist stuff is not only abolitionist in the respect of the criminal justice system, but it is to abolish grand juries, abolish, all kinds of different issues that are not serving us and that are relics. And when we talk about things that are holdovers from even slavery and the destruction of Reconstruction,
that's right,
people's ears perk up. People say, what? That's why this is still here? So it's not just about where and when and what we say, it's how we reach the people, but it's what messages we're delivering to people that sort of gets us out of this stuck mode of how hard things are right now. That's because right. If we don't fight through this hard time, right. It's only going to be harder.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I need to respond. I mean, one thing I'll say to the last point you just brought up, Dazon, is that it is a challenging time. I don't want to minimize that or undermine the impact of this moment. And yet we have to fight. Because two things: when we fight, we do win, but also when we fight, we get power. That's right. We can't deny ourselves that power. And so it's really important in these moments that it's not an individual fight. For folks watching, you don't got to do this alone. That's why there's lots and lots of organizations doing it. So just join something, right? Join something, be a part of something. It does feel helpless if you are not a part of something. It feels helpless if you're just using social media to sort of leverage your complaints and anger. Totally fine place to do that. But I promise you, being a part of some group that is actively not just working on elections work, but also actively doing the work in between time will make you feel so much more hopeful.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. The other thing that we have to be conscious of is that our mental health, our emotional health, our spiritual well-being is also under the greatest duress right now.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And when depression and all of those things start to hit us, we're already in this physical isolation. We tend to want to even isolate more.
Right.
That's what happens when our mental health is threatening us. Other than, and in addition to getting the therapy, however and wherever you need that, the safest and healthiest for you, I'm just going to leave that wide open for people, however they get their therapy and their treatment. That belonging to something, as Patrisse said, is the next thing. If you can't connect with people, find an issue that people are organizing and mobilizing around. Get outside of your head and get in the game about this fight and get the vote situation organized. Get on a particular issue. Make sure that if you're sitting there, that if you're not just dialing all day, your Congress people, and if you're not dialing all day, your local legislators, then that's a way of connecting and releasing some of that pressure from the depression or from the mental anxieties that we are all under. If we act, then we're not able to sit still and suffer and sort of suffocate ourselves inside of the pain that we're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that. When we fight, and when we fight, we get power. And the reality is, you're right. Both of you are right. Is one of the biggest issues is the isolation factor of feeling like, we used to go to work and see friends and have lunch and coffee with friends, and then we do some work and things. Working in a vacuum means that we have to reach out more.
Yes.
People need to feel connected. So I'm going to have to move on soon, but here's my final question. How do people connect to each of your organizations? Where do they find you?
Unfortunately, you can find us everywhere, but you got to make sure you find the right ones. So for us, for Black Lives Matter, you can go to blacklivesmatter.com, and that is our legit site. That is where you can go. That's where you can get more information. There are hosts of Black Lives Matter chapters. Not all of them are legit, and I'm sorry. That's just the case. But many of them are, and they're doing amazing work in their own local communities. But I'll also just big up organizations across the country that are doing amazing work. Movement for Black Lives, which is a coalition of 150 organizations, Black-led orgs. You could check them m4bl.org. And if you are in a place where, you're really trying to get involved, please do your research. Do your research, look around. I tell this to everybody, join something. And I'll say this till my face is blue and purple, because it's no way to live trying to do this work on your own and trying to fight on your own. And I promise you that many of the questions you may have are trying to be answered in this moment by so many other folks. So please, please, please find something, join an organization that has Black women in leadership. I trust Black women the most when it comes to moments like this. We have much of where we are at now, Black women warned the country. We warned folks, like, we don't get here if you don't listen, if you don't do differently, and now we're here. And so we got to band together.
Mm-hmm. It's absolutely true. So I would start first out, of course, by you can subscribe to us at sisterlove.org. And I would say sisterlove.org because sisterlove.com might mean something to other people that isn't relevant to us, and might be actually subject to Sesta Foster, but that's a whole nother conversation you could have. But if you go to sisterlove.org, you can subscribe and then follow all of our different announcements, our activities, and what we've got going on. Because we're in the RJ Week of Action right now, there's a lot happening. We're even doing these debate sessions the day after each debate that's happening over the next few weeks. So we want people to tune into our Facebook page for that. Follow us on all of the socials that are standard out there. And I would say that for some people, the issues actually are critical. So look for those Black women-led organizations, coalitions, networks that are focused on your issues. If you've been lifted up by, your anger has been heightened by the ICE issue here in Irwin County, Georgia, and you're concerned about forced sterilizations and the abuse of women's bodies in incarceration or in detention, then Project South or sistersong.net. Those are the places that you want to connect with there. If you're interested in the issues around HIV and AIDS, I'm with the Act Now End AIDS Coalition. There's all different places where you can plug in on your issue, and you can plug in with your people, and you can plug in with the policies that you want to see happen. For those of us who are in the reproductive justice, all things intersectional space, if you plug into any one of us, I guarantee you that just about all your issues are being addressed. So of course there would be blackrj.org, right?
Yes, of course, which of course is In Our Own Voices website. Thank you
Exactly.
very much for that one, Dazon. I want to thank both of you again, and
This was lovely.
we're going to move on to a discussion about building Black power. And
Thank you.
I want to thank you very much for being with us. And again, Dazon Dixon Diallo and Patrisse Cullors, thank you very much. We really, and of course, this conversation could go on forever, but we're moving on to our next piece.
I do have a radio show, Marcella. We can make a plan.
Oh, that's true. And that's the other thing. Make a plan to vote.
Make a plan to vote. That's right.
Plan to vote. Share that plan with your friends and your family. Make sure you know what you're going to be doing on election day or before, if it's early voting or mail-in voting. Thank you.
Sorry, Marcella, somebody's just asked. So even if you follow us, it's Sisters Time Women Speak on WRFG. So we're right here in Atlanta, but we're also on the web. Look for us.
Thank you very much. And we're going to move on to our last segment. And I want to introduce Jessica Byrd. Oh, there she is. Jessica Byrd and Natasha D Mays. And I'm going to do a nice little introduction, a quick introduction, because we got a lot to cover here. So
Natasha, this hat. Okay, sorry.
I know. We already talked about her hat.
Edges just snatched. Okay.
So Jessica Byrd is the founding partner of 3 Point Strategies. If you're one of those people who wants to run for office, you can contact Jessica because she can help you with that. And Natasha D Mays runs New Voices for Reproductive Justice. It is based in Pennsylvania and Ohio. They do great work. And New Voices is also part of In Our Own Voice, National Black Women's Reproductive Justice Agenda. So let's just get right into this because we're a little bit behind, but I want to really talk about, I'd like each of you to define Black power, Black political power in your own thoughts.
Yes.
You have time for that, Marcella? We're here forever.
That's what we're going to be talking about now, is how to really build Black political power for our communities.
I can get us started.
Okay.
Hi, I love you two, and I admire you both so much. So thank you for having me on to join your conversation. So for me, power means the ability to change the rules and to govern. And, I am completely, unbelievably addicted to campaigns because I love the idea of having a benchmark. I love being able to measure our ability to win. But for the North Star of Black political power for me is about governance and being able to create the rules, to be able to change the rules, and to really name the terms at which the structures that we need are built and designed and execute in order to serve our people.
Natasha?
And so, power is the thing that we know that we deserve, but don't always know how to achieve it. It's such an elusive concept, but we know it when we see it, when we feel it, how it manifests in others, how it manifests in Black people, especially as we work in collective movement. And so for me, when we're talking about Black power, while we must always pay homage to the past, we do have to imagine what is the type of Black power that is needed for this moment and for the future. And when we talk about the future, I always quote Alicia Wormsley from Pittsburgh. She's an artist there. She had an installation in a gentrified part of Pittsburgh that said, there are Black people in the future.
That's right.
I think that is something we have to understand, because everything around us is telling us that we should not exist.
That's
right. And that has been the foundation of this country since Black people set foot on these shores. And I think that imagining what Black political power is has to start with understanding that we already exist in the future. Now, I've never been an Afrofuturist, but if you really think about that, you know that you're setting yourself up for your destiny.
Yes.
And I think that's what this moment is right now, whether we get to experience that new future, that new Black future, that's what we're building. We're building for those who come after us, just like our ancestors have done for us. To me, ultimately, it's an intersectional endeavor around Black power now and in the future. I think what it looks like, what has to be different from how we've talked about Black power in the past is that we have to be able to take care of ourselves as Black people. And that's how do we keep ourselves and each other safe and secure? That is a new way we have to move around Black power. How do we decolonize our mind? I've really been into this idea of resting and the NAP ministry. Shout out to the NAP ministry on Instagram, because it's telling us that we are not machines. And that's an enslavement mentality. And so I think that we would rest more and give ourselves more grace in a new kind of Black political power. And also would just kind of say the cultural power has always been a part of Black power. How do we harness that even more in ways that can inspire people to want to fight and to organize and to run for office? But ultimately, I do think that we have to abolish the institutions that have killed Black people, harmed Black people, or dehumanized Black people. As long as they exist, they will always be in the way of us actually achieving Black power.
Okay. I'm glad you went second. that was intentional.
So what are the steps?
Yes. Yep.
What are the steps that we need to build? We saw this whole summer protests in the streets that were around police murdering unarmed Black men and women. And those protests were not just Black people. They were people of all races, of all ages. And it was just a phenomenal thing to see across many, many cities and overseas, where people were saying enough is enough. And it's protests that have been sustained to the extent that white supremacists are now threatened by it. So they basically came up with a way to make sure that Black Lives Matter and those people who came out to support the protests were being vilified. Mm-hmm. That's the response we get. And I say white supremacists, including our current president, who called out the white supremacists to come out.
Right. They're coordinating them. That's right.
Called out the military to come out and do this, and called out, police to come out and basically attack peaceful protest.
Yes.
What do we do about that in terms of building Black political power? How do we respond?
Mm-hmm. Well, I love this question because I do feel like the answer is often unsatisfactory, but for me, actually gives me a lot of comfort. One, I'll say, and I'm here repping the Movement for Black Lives Electoral Justice Project as well. And so I can't tell you how incredibly courageous and visionary Black people are, period. All Black people, especially in this country right now, inside of this particular moment, the largest civil, protest in this country's history. 26 million people over the last 4 months have come out to protest. That's 26 million people. I want us to really think about that. What could we do with 26 million people?
Mm-hmm.
What could we do with 26 million people? And so that part of the first part of your answer, because I know Latasha is going to turn up on the second part, is we have to have a multi-tactical front. In 2017, right after the 2016 election cycle, I had just created 3-point strategies specifically after the Ferguson uprising so that I could take this tactic I had been learning for 15 years and contribute it to Black movement. I truly wanted to say, use me. Help my life be in service of Black movement for however long we need in order to win. And what I learned inside of my own best and highest use is that when we are each in our best and highest, most contributing use, we can win a lot of stuff. So if I'm in an electoral lane, and for folks who are listening, if voting, if being the person who's looking for your brothers and sisters and knowing what's going on in your neighborhood, if that's your lane, jump in it and drive. If your lane is direct action, is protest, is organizing with people in the streets, if that's your lane, we need you, because we'll need to continue to defend Black lives until we can build this system inside of our images. If you are an elected official, be in your lane. We didn't send you in there and do all this work to create a political condition for you to turn your backs on the people that have made it possible for you to be elected. So do the work of the people who sent you there. Do the work of movement. If you're a policymaker, the Movement for Black Lives drafted a piece of federal legislation this year, 8 Black women, called the Breathe Act, which is a 21st century civil rights legislation. And that wasn't all of our backgrounds, but the truth of the matter is the multi-tactical front that we were in required that we take it a step further and take our ideas and the demands in the streets and move it into the legislative body, which means that the next kind of phase of this is this Black November that's coming up. Every single part of these tactics are a continuum that is building power. We can't do anything without all of them. So we need people to rise up in the streets, to raise our consciousness, to force us to talk about conversations that we will never talk about, to make a demand that maybe some people think is out of touch in defund the police, but y'all are talking about it. And now we get to talk, now we get to debate about it in legislative bodies. Now we get to elect candidates who believe it. Now we get to talk to our mayors about the budget and the policing system. Now we get to vote for people. So that's how we are all really in concert together. And I am feeling, and this is the last thing I'll say, is I am feeling the anxiety. I'm feeling it. People they're calling me, they're texting me. And anytime you open the internet, you feel it. Right. And I just want to say to everyone now, we can do this. We got it. We got it. 26 million people, we got it. And so find your place inside of any of those tactics. And we will get each other, and that continuum will really continue to help us to build the governing power that we need. So when people say reimagining and you're like, yeah, what does that mean? Well, what it means is when we run this, we are going to build the thing that we need, and we can't do that without all those steps.
Natasha?
So, to me, the most invigorated I ever feel as a leader in our movement for reproductive justice, as a previous candidate for elected office, or as an organizer, that's my foundation, is when we take to the streets. Because that is, to me, the greatest expression of us owning our democracy, us owning our power, and us actually using our voice. Bell Hooks says to go from silence to speech is a revolutionary act. And I never feel more invigorated when we take to the streets, because that's the way you discharge those emotions. That's the way you find inspiration to continue. And that's what's happening all across this nation, as Jessica just described. That's what's happening in the wake of the decision to not charge the cops who killed Breonna Taylor on Wednesday. Organizing, there's such a piece of it that is an art, and there's such a piece of it that is a science.
That's right.
Sometimes I find it can be imbalanced, but when we find that long-term balance between organic and strategic organizing, I think that is how we build the steps. And with that, having resource sustainable organizations is how you sustain movements.
Right.
And that's, you don't have to be a 501c3 to do that. And I think we want to get away from this idea that that's the only path. Because if that was the path, then I wouldn't be sitting here before you right now. So resource organizations, Black-led, Black, women, queer, trans, non-binary led organizations are what we need to build those steps. And lastly, as we talk about in the movement for Black lives, is that the steps require us to be unapologetically Black, feminist, and queer.
Yeah.
We have to all go to our destination, to the promised land of Black liberation together. Even, and I say for those who want to go, because everybody don't want to go.
Yeah.
And so how do we organize the willing? And we create the opportunity for those who want to be in it but can't do it right now. And I think those are some of the ways that we build the steps, as well as this piece around mutual aid and us being able to sustain ourselves in Black communities. And I think that's a piece we miss, and that's what capitalism creates for us, is that we are dependent on others for our short-term and long-term needs.
And so as what's interesting about it, this whole discussion and the other guests that we had on, is that I'm looking at retiring. And then all of you come onto this and start talking about all the things that are going on. And I'm like, okay, well, I want to get in the middle of this. And I'm thinking there has got to be a way to do both. But there is, it's this, and I watched people marching in the streets, and given COVID, I knew I couldn't go there, but I could watch and I could encourage and I could write about it. But it was one of those things where you remember marching in the streets in the 60s and the 70s, and here we are in 2020, and Black people still have to march in the streets.
That's right.
And you kind of want to say there has got to be a point where we don't have to do this anymore. So the point is we do have to keep doing it until it's done.
Mm-hmm.
But, sometimes you just want done to be faster, and it's not. It just really isn't. And I really appreciated, Latasha, when you talked about NAP.
Yes, the NAP ministry.
The NAP ministry, because sometimes you just have to force rest on yourself.
Yeah.
And in order to stay in movement. And the reality is that it may be another generation, but there is something in the air now. There's something happening that says we are almost there. There are things, and you feel it because these white supremacists are out in the street pushing back. And and you see these conservative politicians on mics pushing back. And that we're getting there, because the level of fear in their voices and their actions tell you that this is different this time.
That's right.
And that's what is remarkable to me.
That's right. And can I just say something quickly to that sentiment, Marcella? because it just this has been a brutal year, and I would just say the last 4 years have been exhausting. I'm exhausted, and I know everybody is exhausted. And what gives me hope, what supports my grounding is knowing that every good thing that has happened over the last decade, for at least that I have been a witness of, and many inheritances of, movement did that. Movement raised our consciousness around the police. Movement asked us why we were keeping Black mamas in jail for $50 and Black mamas bailout. It's been reproductive justice movement who has said to us, oh, it's not just about abortion, which is so important. It's about the ways in which Black women are being kept from their rights to their bodily and family autonomy all over the place. It was Black women who gave us intersectionality. It has been Black trans women who have raised our consciousness to say, y'all are fighting specifically around a violence that actually would never abolish the violence against us. Could you wake up? Could you help us stay alive? And all of us have the ability, have the choice to go on that freedom journey with us. And that for me has given me everything, even the Black mayors we could be mad at right now, movement elected them, right? Even when I think about the RNC election, the RNC convention, all they were talking about was movement. All they were saying was enemy number one was movement. So we have power. That means movement has power. They didn't say, forgive me, but it's past 8, so I can be crass. That 80-year-old white man, we just so scared of him, right? They said the thousands of Black people in the street, the tens of thousands of people who are demanding change. Those are the people we're afraid of, and you should be afraid of them too. But we're not afraid. We're not afraid of them. We're not afraid of the army they're going to send on election day. We are not afraid of their spooky ancestors that they are trying to conjure up to scare us from our inheritance. As Latasha said, we are already in the future. And so for me, every time I start to feel like maybe potentially something is too off, maybe we just didn't ask the right questions, I'm like, everything good about my life, everything good about my politics, everything that we could claim victory over, movement did. And so if that's the truth, then I'm where I'm supposed to be. And I want everyone to join inside of that, so your purpose can be connected really to your individual liberation as well.
Absolutely.
So yet again, we're out of time.
Come on, get the wine out, Marcella.
And we could keep talking and stuff. We may have to come back. Latasha keeps coming back. We're gonna have to get you to come back.
Too brilliant. You gotta, yeah.
We have to do this. I wanna just give a shout out to our RJ Week of Action, that all of our partner organizations, I did not mention the partner organizations, Black Women for Wellness, Black Women's Health Imperative, New Voices for Reproductive Justice, Sister Song, the Afia Center, Women with a Vision, and I have left out somebody.
Spark,
Reproductive Justice Now. Thank you very much.
I got
Those
you.
are our partners.
We'll have you back.
Right? Because Crystal will call me. So yes. And all of them are doing things this week in their states, in their cities, but this is ongoing. We're just highlighting this week of action. And if you want to know more about the week of action, you can go to blackrj.org, click on where it says RJ Week of Action, and it can give you a lot of information about what people are doing. Again, for voting, please go to blackwomen.vote, check your state, make sure that you are registered, Make sure you know what you got to do in your state. If you got an absentee ballot and you haven't filled it out yet, fill it out and send it in, because the time is a ticking. And if you're going to vote early, make sure you know when. And if you're going to the polls on election day, make sure you do that too. Make sure you mask up and you are ready to actually take on your voting, and make sure that the people we talked about that we elect are doing what they promised to do. And so I want to thank Natasha D Mays and Jessica Byrd for being my final guests on this program. And as always, it was a wonderful discussion and wonderful to have you both here.
Thank you, Marcella, and In Our Own Voice for all that you're doing to weave us together so beautifully. So thank you.
Thank you. And remember, I am a voter. Do not forget to vote. Do not forget that if you've got state elections and local elections and elections for judges,
that's right,
elections for state's attorney and city attorney, if they're going on in your state, make sure you vote, because that also matters. Those down ballot races matter a lot.
And so if you're in Pennsylvania and Ohio, please connect with New Voices. newvoicesrj.org/RJWOA2020 for all of our RJ Week of Action events. We'll see you at our Friday pop-ups in Philly and Cleveland, and we'll be giving out all the I Am a Voter swag. So
we have great swag.
Excellent swag all the way on.
Let's say I am a voter. I want everybody to get the mask swag and go out and wear it when you go and vote.
Absolutely.
Even if you vote by absentee, wear it anyway while you're filling out your ballot. Just because. And thank you very much again for having us. And I'm going to sign off now. I think I've done all the stuff. I just want to remind people, BlackWomen'sRJ.org or BlackRJ.org. Black Women's
RJ on social media.
Twitter, our social media thing. So that's it.
Awesome. Good night, y'all.